Hey guys, happy Thursday. So today we are going to answer Perfect Chaz 321's second question to me, which was, how the heck do you change an SJ's mind? So it's a good question. I could do this for any particular group of types, so I don't think there's something particularly tricky about changing an SJ's mind compared to anyone else. Sorry for the sirens and stuff, it's like an eternal feature of living in Bucharest. Let's talk about what it means to change someone's mind first a little bit. Specifically, there are two kind of different ways you can look at it. One of them is getting an SJ to do something or to let you do something. The second way, so like they're refusing to do something you want them to do, or they won't give you permission, maybe your boss or your parent. That's one way that you might want to change someone's mind. The second way is changing their mind about a particular idea. You know, they think, I don't want to do anything political, so let's say they think that broccoli is gross. You want them to think that broccoli is great. Okay, so those are two different ways you can talk about changing someone's mind, and we're gonna talk a bit about both of them. The second thing you need to keep in mind is that what we decide is actually related to both our perceiving and our judging functions. So the way it relates to our judging functions is obvious, like they allow us to make value judgments, to make decisions. So good or bad, right or wrong, true or false. So in that sense, usually when people are having debates, these are the functions that they're trying to appeal to. You know this is morally right, so blah blah blah, or here's a logical argument for why you should believe this, right? Appealing to their judging functions. However, in my experience, most of the time when people are having difficulty communicating with each other, or when two people are like passionately arguing different sides of a subject, especially when they both have the feeling like the other person is just not getting it, like what's wrong with them, why aren't, they're missing the obvious, they're being willfully ignorant, that kind of thing. What you're actually looking at is a discord between the perceiving functions. So that's intuition. I should have clarified before, judging functions are thinking and feeling, and now I'm talking about the perceiving functions, which are intuition and sensing. So for example, you can have two FE DOMs, an ENFJ and an ESFJ, who seemingly should be able to come to the same conclusion about some issue. They both have FE. Of course, their FE is a little bit different, but it's the basic same function, But these two people can come to very different conclusions, not only due to life experience and culture and those kind of things, but particularly due to their different perceiving functions. They perceive the world a different way, Things that mean something to one person don't mean the same thing to someone else. You can't agree on a value judgment if you don't even know what you're judging, like if you're not even judging the same thing, right? So when I talk about changing an SJ's mind, I'm particularly coming at this from the perspective of someone who uses NISE, because I feel like those are the people who are gonna have the biggest difficulty changing an SJ's mind. NPs will struggle with it too, and then of course any two people can always have disagreements, so another SJ could have the problem too. And I think that NPs and SJs, and who am I forgetting? SPs will all get something out of this video, but particularly it's aimed towards, SPs and NJs, let's say. SPs and SJs, and NJs, people who use SE and I. SPs and NJs, okay, we got it. Alright, so how does it manifest differently whether someone values SINE or NISE, specifically in terms of a debate? Well, one thing that you'll notice with people who have valued NI is that we often feel like we're debating about what something means. Either what it means, like in terms of definition, what does kindness mean, what does efficiency mean, right? Or what does it mean in terms of implications? So if I say that stealing is okay, what does that mean for society? How does that affect society? Or if I, if I decide that, like, we don't actually live in a democracy, sorry to make it political, what does that mean for what we should do in the future, for example? And that's an NI thing. And it's related to SE, because when we're talking about SE, we're talking about what something is. What is the structure of our society, or what is the situation at hand. If you're, arguing with your mom about whether or not you should be allowed to go out, an SE&I person looks at it from the perspective of, what is our relationship now? What are the current circumstances? What kind of person am I? What rights do I have? These are discussions about current context and the implications of that context, or the implications of those facts. With an SINE person, not to say that they're like completely unaware of those topics, but that just doesn't describe how they interpret the world, the lens through which they view it. So SI looks at things in terms of the obvious explanation is personal experience. So what I know, what has happened in the past, what my expectations are. That's a big thing that people don't often notice when you're talking about SI. It's not just what happened in the past, but it's extrapolating forward from that. Because every time you go out, you came home late, I'm expecting that you still will. And conversely, for example, because I give a particular kind of consideration to you, you should also be giving that kind of consideration to me. Their judging functions use their lived experience to make decisions about what's right and wrong, or true and false. And then NE is primarily concerned with not the likely ramifications, but all of the possible ramifications. So, for example, let's make it a little concrete. Let's say that I'm a kid, I've got an ESTJ mom, or an ESFJ mom I'll use, since that's what mine was, and I want to go out. Okay, I'm thinking in terms of, well, I'm 17 now, I'm gonna be 18 next year. When I'm 18, I'm gonna have to make these decisions for myself anyway, and I want to be able to show my mom that I'm mature, because I will come back home by curfew, so that way she'll be able to trust me in the future. So I'm thinking about the current situation, the near future, and the implications. You should let me do it to prove this, to prove that I'm mature. Whereas my mom is thinking about it in terms of my whole, like from my mom's perspective, my whole life I've been entrusted with taking care of this child. It's my duty to ensure their safety. That's my responsibility, and that's like the concern that I keep in mind whenever I'm making a decision about their future, or their choices. Additionally, I know from experience that my child often reneges on agreements, and even though sometimes she follows through, it's likely that she may, anything, like it's a possibility that she may not come home on time. So it doesn't matter to my mom so much whether I will or won't come home. She's not thinking, oh, she'll probably come home because she's making this a point. She doesn't care about that. She just thinks about the different possibilities. It's a possibility she won't come home on time. She'll get in trouble. She'll get arrested by the police for breaking curfew or whatever. Yes, that's a thing in some cities. And because that's a possibility, and those ramifications are unacceptable given my responsibility to my child, I won't let her go. It doesn't matter, not as much what the current situation is, what the implications are, what the future goals are. It matters what the possible negative consequences could be. Okay, so if I'm the kid in that position, it's, I was gonna say stupid, let's say it's ignorant, like you literally just don't know, it won't work. But it doesn't work to keep arguing about why you want to do it. You know, it's not gonna make an impact to your mom, because it, you know, I want to prove that I'm an adult doesn't make it impossible that you won't come home on time. So it doesn't change her estimation of like the course of events. So the question is, how do you change her mind about it? How do you get in there and make her answer you differently than she was going to before? Well, you have to know the basis she's making her judgment on. Like, and this is something so many people overlook in any kind of disagreement between any two types. Like, why are they choosing that? What is the basis of their decision? You know, if you don't 100% truly understand the other person's basis, and it's important to notice that they don't always know what it is either. But I guarantee you, there's like almost zero chance you know better than them. Like, even me as an ENFJ, I assume all the time that I know what other people are really thinking, and I've really had to break myself out of that habit, because it's like they have way more information than I do. Most of the time people are trying to be genuine, and yeah, you know, so the best way to find out what someone really thinks is to ask them. And especially with an SFJ, it's a bad idea to come at it when you're upset. No, but any SJ, STJs too. If you're emotionally upset, if you're angry, if you're feeling the desire to push for your point of view, and this goes with getting permission for things or making someone do things a lot, as well as like changing someone's mind about something. If you feel in your heart the desire to push for something, you gotta like go away and take a chill pill and relax before you come back to it. Because another aspect of SE is this sense, and I do, is this sense of push and pull, right? So you know how important something is to someone based on how forcefully they say it. You know when you've crossed a line based on how strong someone's emotional reaction is. These are things that are natural to SE and I people. If I ask someone to do something and they're like, I don't really want to, then you know that you have leverage. If I push a little harder, then they'll be more likely to do it. That's our natural like instinct, right? But actually, it doesn't work that way with SI and E people. It actually works the opposite way, which is like, if they show wishy-washiness, it's more likely that they're like trying to simmer down and like placate you. So that actually means that they're less likely to do what you're wanting them to do, or believe what they're wanting them to believe. Let me give an example. So like, if I'm at a party and I'm talking to any SJ about politics, and I say, you know, let me choose a better example. I'm talking about books, okay? I'm talking about books. And I say, you know, you gotta read this science fiction book, it's great. And they say, yeah, I bet it's really interesting. And, you know, to an SE&I person, it might be like, oh, they need to be convinced. Let me like explain more. Let me explain like why it's good, like why they should read it. But actually, like, for an SJ, that's them being scared of disagreeing with you. It doesn't demonstrate any hesitance or openness in terms of their opinion. You know, if they're relaxed, they're gonna sound more forceful. They're gonna say, no, I don't like sci-fi. And then you actually can come in and start talking about it more, because you can see that they don't have their guard up. You know what I'm saying? So I would say that's something that you really need to keep in mind, is if an SJ seems calm and direct, that's actually a good time to discuss things with them. Whereas if they seem wishy-washy, if they seem emotional, if they're whining, that's something they do, and it's just, oh, you know, like this kind of voice, like, it's a really bad time to try to discuss things with them, because that's them like doing, you know how like some animals have like some submissive behavior that it's like trying to end a conflict. That's how they do it, rather than like forceful and like, we're gonna pound this conflict into the ground, you're gonna listen to what I say. They don't tend to approach things that way. ESJs do have demonstrative SE, so in situations where it's really necessary, self-defense, defending a loved one, something like that, they can be, or you know, especially if someone's really unhealthy and like feels, that's the thing, self-defense can mean whatever the person thinks it means. So if someone feels attacked all the time, whether they are or not, they can overuse their demonstrative function in this way. But yes, all ESJs can be forceful when it's absolutely necessary, but it's not their preference. That's not how they prefer to handle a conflict. And if you're yelling at an ESJ or an ISJ, you've already lost. They can't hear you. You're not going to change anybody's mind. They're not going to back down because you're yelling at them. It just doesn't work that way. It can with NPs because they have weak SE, so it's unvalued but it's weak, so a lot of times they can feel intimidated by it. They can't push back, so they just cave and give in and roll over and die. Not always, but in general they can. It's possible that that will happen, but with an SJ they have strong SE. It's just not valued, so it's not gonna, you're not gonna push them. So how do you get them? So once you get them in a calm, stoic, relaxed, serious state, or I mean, they can be playful or relaxed in that way, but either serious or playful, but never whiny, submissive, upset, defensive. It's not going to work in those cases. But so, okay, so let's say you've got them in an open state. And you want to change their mind about something. What can you do? Well, like I said, pushing is not going to work. The more you push, they're not necessarily going to push back, but they're just going to be unmoved. They just are not going to respond to it, and they're going to put up more barriers around themselves. So the answer is that you got to pull. What does it mean to pull? Well, two things. One is repetition, and the other is, how would I put it? What ifing, I guess you could say. So let's talk about repetition first of all. Do not ever expect to introduce a new idea to an SJ and have them think about it and accept it on the spot. If it happens, it's rare. Or it's something that they already didn't have any issue with. You know, if you're like, try this pie, and they try it, it's not because you like convinced them to try the pie, it's because they don't have an issue with trying pie anyway. If you say to someone, try this pie, and they're like, oh no thanks, you're not gonna get them to change their mind in the moment. Especially like, even if you can force them to eat it because they're like, well fuck, like now I gotta eat it or everyone's staring at me, and like it's like really, but they won't forgive you for that. They won't forget it, and in the future it will be harder to get them to do what you want. So trying to force something through in a moment is not a good strategy. A better strategy is to keep bringing it up over time. Give it time to simmer and percolate in the meantime, but once a week say, that pie was really good, and then the next week maybe you bake another one and you offer them a slice, but if they turn it down, that's fine, it's no problem. You know, I think that I'm not sure about SPs, but I know NJs often feel like kind of disgusted by this thing. Like, I already said I don't want it, stop hinting about it, stop bringing it up, you know, don't tell me what to do. Like, that's an NJ thing, and I think it's probably true for SPs too, yeah. But for SJs it's actually good, because the more often, obviously you don't want to like badger them and like never talk about anything else or anything, but you got to keep giving them an opportunity to change their mind, and the opportunity has to come with no strings attached. You know, it has to be just like, hey, you wanna try now? You know, persistent positive vibes, new information, so don't just necessarily keep saying the same thing over and over, but you know, like I said, for example, bringing up the pie, oh, this cake tastes really good. It tastes just like that pie I made the other day. Or, oh, I made another one. Or, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could bring that pie to like grandma next week? I think she would really like it. Or, you know, things like that, bring it up in different contexts, so that it becomes a familiar concept to them, and eventually their curiosity will likely win out. They'll want to know what it is that you're talking about. Avoid making declarative statements that imply something about them. So if I'm trying to change someone's mind about an opinion, some kind of topic, and okay, let's say I'm a teacher at a school and I have a coworker who's an SJ, and I know that this coworker gives the students like 2 hours of homework a night, and my students always complain to me like, oh, we can never finish all the homework she gives us, like she you know, because of this teacher's homework policy, all the students' grades in the other classes are suffering. And you've tried to talk to the teacher about it, and she just is like not hearing you, won't listen. So what you're going to do is you're going to do the repeated mention thing, but you're going to avoid implicating her. So you're not going to go, the students are complaining about your homework, you know, you give too much homework, and like, hey, let's all give less homework this week. Like, it's not going to work. But what you can do is roundabout bring it up, right? So, oh gosh, my students seem really stressed out today. I don't know why. Like, oh, poor Betty she spent a long time on homework yesterday, she said, and her mom's sick, and, or, you know, I've thought about it, and I really think I'm going to try to give less homework because I read this article that blah, 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 blah. This indirect, passive-aggressive method of introducing someone to a new concept without directing it at them, without accusing them of anything, is going to help a lot, especially if you can make them think it's their idea. You know, maybe because that's the cool thing about SJs, is that they're often actually really open-minded. They like novelty, they like trying new things, they like looking at things from new perspectives, but it's not easy for them, you know, and you have to be considerate of that. We all have things that are not easy for us to do, and if you're not aware of the extent to which that applies to you, then even more evidence, right? So, you know, I was thinking about this. I was thinking, like, when you try to explain to an SJ, this is what this means. If you do this, it means this. Or if you do this, this is what will happen. Can't you see that? Like, are you an idiot? Like, when you start to talk like that, their brains just shut off. It's like unvalued NI, right? So unvalued weak NI. This means this, or this will happen, is just a useless approach. They can't receive what you're saying, so it's like you're just babbling, and then they're annoyed that you're babbling about nothing, right? And like, I was trying to think of like how this could apply to all the different types, so you can kind of imagine how it feels for them. So for NJs, it's that situation where someone's like, don't you remember, we already talked about this before, we've done this a million times, like, and you're just like staring like, actually I don't remember what you're talking about. Or they'll say, but last month you said XYZ, like, don't you remember that? And you're like, what does that matter? We're arguing about it now, right? So the way that makes you feel, that's how it makes them feel to talk about NI things, what it means or what's gonna happen going forward. There's other stuff too. If someone says, I can't do that, it's never worked before, and it just feels like, well, maybe you did it wrong, or, you know, like, it just, those kind of like past experiences just don't seem to make much of a difference, you know. For NPs, it's the kind of thing, let's say NTPs, it's the kind of thing where someone says, I don't care if you're right, if you're an asshole, or like, you were so rude, and then they won't hear why you did what you did, or how they're being rude. All they hear is like all they want to talk about is how rude you were and not like what you were, the content of what you were saying, the way that makes you feel. For NFPs, it's like well, I don't care what you want, or like I don't care if you don't like it, or I don't care if it seems wrong to you, because it's just the truth. Like, can't you just accept the truth, man? Like, you know, your feelings don't matter. It's just, you know, cold hard facts. Like, it's just obvious that this is true, even if it's like a really horrible, odious thing I'm saying, right? Or I'm gonna say whatever I want to say because it's true. It doesn't matter who it hurts, that kind of thing. It's like, it doesn't matter, you know, in those situations you feel like they're missing the point, right? You're like, well, you know, I don't even want to argue about whether it's true or not because you shouldn't say it, for instance, just an example. You know, like, you feel like the other person is just totally missing the point, right? And then for SPs, I thought about it. It's a little bit harder for me to conceptualize what those kind of arguments would be for them. My guess is that it might be something like, well, why don't you just blank, you know, if someone comes to you with a problem, or if you come to someone with a problem and they're like, why don't you just do this? And it's like this like really far out thing that you have no idea how to do, and you're like, you know, annoyed that they don't understand the circumstances, but they're giving advice anyway, you know, even though they don't know. That might be true for FI people too. But anyway, sorry, my SP example, I'm not sure if it's applicable. You guys can tell me in the comments. But yeah, so when you come to an SJ with, can't you see what this means? Or like, isn't it obvious if you do this, it will have this bad consequence? It's just nonsense. It misses the point of how they make their decisions. So don't do it. Yeah. So, those are my two main pieces of advice. Repetition. Keep bringing it up in new contexts, new circumstances, especially in a non-threatening, relaxed, indirect way. And the other one being, try to spark their curiosity. Make it something that can benefit them in some way, or that can show them something new that they hadn't known before. And try to avoid, this is something I really struggle with SJs, trying to avoid being didactic, explaining them a thing like they're idiots. Actually, the role you want to take with an SJ in general is like a childlike role, and this kind of goes to something they all have in common, all SJs have in common, which is their romance style. Their romance style is called caregiver, and it doesn't just apply to romance, it applies to a lot of different interactions you have with people. Their natural state is to take care of other people, to be in charge, to be responsible for them, and so the most comfortable counterpart to that is the childlike role, which is the role that NPs usually follow. So when you're approaching an SJ, you should think about their dual and how their dual would handle the similar situation. I'll talk about that in a second. But all of their duals are childlike romance styles. So you want to be curious, you want to be persistent, nagging even a little bit, but not in a aggressive way. You should approach it in a childlike way, a open and innocent kind of approach. And that's easier for some than others to do, but you know, try to remove as much aggression and pushing and authority from your position as you can, and that's going to give you the best results. As far as their duals, so if you're dealing with an ESTJ, their dual is an INFP. You want to think about how an INFP would approach the situation. Maybe even ask an INFP, hey, I've got this boss who is making us stay late, what would you do in that situation? And follow suit. An ISTJ, if you're dealing with an ISTJ, their dual is an ENFP, so you want to be as loud and annoying as possible. Okay, I'm just kidding. But like, think about how an ENFP would approach the situation, what they would do. And again, you can ask for advice. If you've got an ESFJ, their dual is an INTP. You want to be rational and calm and hold your ground, but be non-threatening. And then for an ISFJ, their dual is an ENTP. So keep in mind that you can be, especially with an ISFJ, you can be aggressive in the way ENTPs are aggressive, which is with little if no SE, right? They're just persistent, maybe would be a better, but what about this? But what about that? You know, have you thought about this? But maybe we could do it like this, you know, like just persistently questioning and excited. And yeah, I want to point out, you don't ever have to lie to convince people of things, and if it seems like lying or being fake, then the issue is just that you don't really understand the interaction. Like, I guess the point I'm making is you always choose how you approach someone. You always choose, am I going to go into this angry, or am I going to calm myself down and go into it then? There's not one authentic way. There might be one automatic way, but like sometimes it's automatic to want to punch someone in the face because they pissed you off, and like you think about like, oh, actually I'm a member of society with morals and I don't just punch people necessarily, you know, just because they insulted my mother or something, you know, like, so in the same way that you make moral choices based on the kind of person you want to be, or even not necessarily a moral choice, just a tactical choice, like if I punch my boss I'll lose my job, so maybe I shouldn't do that, you know. Making choices about how to approach people based on their individual needs, what will work with them and what will turn them off. It's not about faking being a different person than you are. It's about like it's doing what they want you to do. They want you to come to them calm. Why are you going to come at them aggressive if they don't want that, if it doesn't help that, and if it doesn't, neither of you get what you want from it? Like, is that the authentic thing to do, to do something stupid just because like it's your first instinct, you know? I'm sorry, I'm getting like really passionate about this because you know, people accuse ENFJs of being fake, but really what's happening a lot of times is we just see, and not always, you know, we all struggle with it, but better than some other types, we see what people need. We see how to communicate our message so that the other person will hear it, you know? That's the whole point, is they hear what I'm trying to communicate, you know? And they get out of a certain circumstance what they want to get out of it, and I'm not bullying them into doing what I want. I'm trying to find a way that it can make both of us happy, you know? So that's my defense for tailoring your message to your audience, for approaching people in a way that makes them feel comfortable, that, you know, and I would strongly encourage you to never be disingenuous, never lie, never hide things from people that they have the right to know. You know, it's one thing to convince someone to do something that they are afraid of doing or they're unsure about, but it's another thing to convince someone to do something that, you know, could hurt them, and you withhold that information. Like, that's not right and it's not fair. But if you give them the necessary information and you approach it in a way that will help them too, or at least be neutral, then I think you have the right to do that. So okay, yeah, one little footnote. So we talked almost entirely about perceiving functions in this video. Obviously there's a whole nother axis. The judging functions, thinking and feeling, make a big difference. Once you're on the same page with someone, you're not guaranteed that they'll have the same opinion of the situation as you do. And I personally think that judging functions are not as difficult to communicate with each other about. Again, it's always seek to understand first and then seek to be understood. So make sure you know what they're talking about. Once you do, then really think about how you can express what your reaction is to that to them in a way that they'll understand. And I think that if you take your time with it, especially with SJs, take your time, think about it, give yourself time to do it, you know, don't push it. You can come to an understanding. You might not be able to change their mind on every issue. You shouldn't expect to, you know, sometimes you might have your mind changed, but ultimately I think that'll smooth out a lot of conflict and help us to understand each other better, and make it easier to get the things that you want out of a situation. It sucks when two people are angry or fighting or, you know, blocked from reaching their goals just because of misunderstanding. You know, they just don't get each other. That's just awful. It's a tragedy, you know. So anything you can do to improve your communication, practice these techniques. You know, talk to your SJ friends about them. Maybe not in a theoretical sense, but specific issues. You know, if your ISTJ friend is doing something annoying, you know, think about what I've said today and rewatch the video, think about it, and see if you can identify any areas that there might be misunderstanding, and then ask them about those areas specifically. So you know, if it might be based on some past maybe they're making a statement or a choice based on some past experience they've had, and you don't know what that experience is, it's worth asking them, you know, have you had this kind of situation in the past? You know, how did it turn out? Really seeking to understand the reasons for their decisions and their thoughts. So all right, I hope I covered it. Let me know if there's anything else that you want more information about on this topic or any other, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.